These are the biggest UFC and MMA stories this weekend. Conor McGregor stepped into an amateur boxing ring in Dublin for €10. Dana White admitted he removed himself from UFC contract negotiations. Jon Jones got into a road rage incident in Albuquerque. Ronda Rousey went scorched earth on the UFC again. Misfits Boxing put $10 million on the table for Dana White to actually fight Eddie Hearn. A full UFC Fight Night card delivered some real finishes. And one UFC fighter found out she'd been cut from the roster through an Instagram comment. Let's get into it. On Good Friday, April 3rd, the biggest star in MMA history actually competed, just not in the UFC. McGregor showed up unannounced at the Crumlin Boxing Club's annual Good Friday show in Dublin. This is the gym where he trained as a kid under Phil Sutcliffe Sr., and he's popped up there before. But this time, he actually laced up the gloves. His opponent was a local amateur named Barry Nolan, and they went 3 rounds of 3 minutes each. Bloody Elbow sources in attendance reported that McGregor scored standing 8 counts in the second and third rounds. Tickets for the whole event cost €10, which comes out to about $11.50. For the price of a sandwich, fans in Crumlin got to watch a former 2-division UFC champion throw hands live. McGregor hasn't fought professionally since July 2021 when he broke his leg against Dustin Poirier at UFC 264. That's nearly 5 years out. A scheduled bout with Michael Chandler in 2024 fell apart because of a broken toe. Then came an 18-month USADA anti-doping suspension that was only lifted this past March. But now, the return actually looks real. Around March 25th, McGregor posted on Instagram, "The rumors are true. Mr. Confidence returns to save fighting again. Call your grandma. Nanny, we did it." July 11th, 2026, during International Fight Week at the T-Mobile Arena in Las Vegas, is the target date. And this weekend, the UFC officially announced that Fight Week runs from July 9th through the 12th. Ariel Helwani put it plainly, "It would be something disastrous at this point if he's not fighting July 11th at International Fight Week." The frontrunner opponent is Max Holloway, who's been angling for a rematch of their 2013 bout on his Kickstream. Chael Sonnen threw out Ian Machado Gary as an alternative, and Nate Diaz told Theo Vaughn on his podcast, "Me and Conor will fight again when the time is right, but it's going to be when we're both on the uprise. I'm nobody's comeback story either." Which means McGregor throwing hands in a Dublin boxing club for $11 might have been the last warm-up before the biggest comeback in MMA history. Or it's another false start. With McGregor, nobody can ever be sure. Speaking of former champions making headlines for the wrong reasons, a video of Jon Jones went viral on April 5th. A driver named Brian Beltran posted on Instagram that Jones nearly hit his vehicle with a truck 3 times somewhere in Albuquerque. Beltran flipped Jones off without recognizing who he was, and that's when the former UFC heavyweight and light heavyweight champion got out of his vehicle and walked up to him.
What, bro? Trying to get into? You're almost fucking hitting me, bro.
You gotta calm down, bro.
Yeah, bro, you gotta learn how to drive, bro. You
gotta relax yourself, bro.
You're almost hitting me with your truck, bro. You're almost hitting me, bro. What the fuck? In my fucking lane and shit, bro. Come on.
Beltran later admitted he had no idea it was Jones when he flipped him off. And while he said he hoped to make amends at some point, he also insisted Jones needs to get his driving right. That brings us to what might be the most telling quote of the entire weekend, and it came straight from Dana White. White appeared on a show called Speed with Harvick and Buxton, and a clip surfaced on April 5th.
When you think about it, when we started this thing, it was like a mom and pop shop,
Yeah.
You know, we were a small business, and as we started to grow, you know, the relationships that I had with like the Chuck Liddells and the Matt Hugheses and guys like that from the early days right up to, you know, McGregor, Ronda Rousey, Cowboy, you know, and the list goes on and on. And but these guys, whenever anything would go wrong in their personal life, we were the first phone call they would make, and
all the time,
you know, things like that. Yeah, and obviously it's grown. I have completely removed myself from the negotiating part of fighter contracts. You know, I got to a point where just this isn't fun anymore, man. I'm lucky that I'm at a point in my life and in my career where I can just deal with the fun stuff that I like to do. So
yeah.
So the long-winded answer to your question is yes. It's been a great ride. It's been fun, and yeah, I've created some great relationships with a lot of our athletes in the past.
Earlier in 2026, White also acknowledged during lawsuit testimony that he's no longer actively involved in UFC matchmaking. According to Boxing News, contract duties have shifted to a team led by Hunter Campbell, the UFC's chief business officer and the man now calling the shots on fighter deals. And when Campbell was asked to describe what Dana White actually does for the company now, his answer was 2 words: growth and strategy. Think about what that means for TKO Group Holdings and for the UFC's future. The man who's been the face of the UFC for 25 years, the guy fighters used to call directly for everything from contracts to personal problems, no longer negotiates deals and no longer handles matchmaking. And the timing of that admission could not be more loaded because of what one particular person has been hammering home for weeks. On Friday, April 3rd, Ronda Rousey posted a behind-the-scenes YouTube video and went right back at the UFC. She framed it as a turning point for the sport and made it clear she thinks the UFC has gotten too comfortable at the top, with too little real pressure pushing them to change. She also took aim at how the company is being run now, arguing that since Dana White lost control over certain parts of the operation, the UFC has drifted and started treating fan disappointment like it doesn't really matter.
And a crossroads for the sport, and this is the beginning of like a big change that is long overdue. I meant it when I said that the UFC is suffering from a lack of competition because they've become too comfortable with being the dominant force in the industry and just making fighters offers where they're like, oh, take it or leave it, what else are you going to do? You know, and it used to be that the UFC was the best way to make money in combat sports, and now it's becoming like the worst place to make money in combat sports. Like it used to be anti-establishment, and now it's become the establishment. And I've always been an anti kind of bitch, so. Don't get me wrong, I'm like a company woman and very grateful, you know, while I was there, but I feel like since they've taken the reins away from Dana, they've really lost their way, and they think that they're too big to fail, and that they can just disappoint the fans over and over, and they don't care how many casual fans they lose because they got their streaming money, and fuck you, we got ours. And I think they need to be reminded of the precariousness of their situation, and they need to start appreciating the fighters. I'm coming to remind them today.
All of it builds on the firestorm she started back on March 10th at the MVP MMA 1 press conference while promoting her upcoming fight with Gina Carano. When she was asked about the Jon Jones contract situation, that opened the door for a much bigger criticism of fighter pay and how the UFC operates behind the scenes. This company just got $7.7 billion from the Paramount Plus streaming deal. There's no reason they can't afford to pay their athletes at least a living wage. She pointed out that UFC champions like Valentina Shevchenko have turned to OnlyFans to supplement their income. She described fighters at the ground level as people who can't even support their families and are living at poverty level fighting full-time. She also brought up the revenue split, reportedly less than 20% going to fighters compared to roughly 60% in boxing. And she still made a distinction when it came to Dana White, calling him loyal to a fault, while arguing he's now an employee of the organization rather than the owner. Joe Rogan backed her up.
You know, Ronda Rousey, she's promoting the Netflix fight. She had this big, long speech about the UFC selling for $7 billion, and these fighters aren't making enough money. And look, she made some good points. And the most important thing is that she gets the conversation out there, and it puts pressure on the UFC to pay people more. you know. And if Netflix can become successful at MMA, if they can become successful at putting cards together and pulling fighters away, like right now they're doing a one-off, right? It's one-off and it's kind of a gimmicky thing.
And listen, this payroll is going to be crazy.
It's going to be crazy.
You got Ronda, Francis, Nate, everybody's getting
crazy money.
The payroll is going to be nuts.
But if anybody's got that kind of money, it's Netflix. Yeah. They throw around a lot of ridiculous money. They make so much money. So they can kind of do that. The question is, are they going to do that more than once? So if they do that more than once, then what happens is it's all about the name of the fighters, just like boxing. Like if boxing, no one cares if it's Golden Boy or Bob Arum. Nobody cares about that. What they care about is who's fighting who. They can be a major player, and that will elevate everybody's pay scale. There's a lot of people like, oh, Ronda, how could you turn her back on the UFC and talk shit like that? She's got a point. They sold it for $7 billion.
Not everyone lined up behind her, though. Sean O'Malley pushed back on the idea that stars like Conor, Jones, and Ronda built themselves independently from the UFC. Jorge Masvidal went even harder with a blunt, "Dana made you." The fighter pay war shows no sign of cooling down, and the Rousey-Carano fight goes down May 16th at the Intuit Dome in Los Angeles, live on Netflix, promoted by Jake Paul's Most Valuable Promotions. While Dana White steps back from fighter contracts, he might actually be stepping into a boxing ring. On April 4th, Misfits Boxing offered $10 million each, $20 million total, for Dana White and Eddie Hearn to box each other for real. Their feud has been building since White launched Zuffa Boxing at the start of 2026. Things really boiled over after Zuffa signed Conor Benn, who had been fighting under Hearn's Matchroom Boxing banner. Then Hearn fired back by signing UFC heavyweight champion Tom Aspinall through his new athlete representation company.
I don't think I started it. They started it by going into boxing and highlighting what they're doing to the fighters in the UFC. And now I'm representing those fighters. I can see the numbers and I can see the contracts. And I just can't believe it, to be honest with you. But fighters are revolting in a way of, you know, they want to be heard. They're under contract. You know, if they weren't under contract, I could do Aspinall against Jon Jones and I'd pay them double what the UFC offered them, probably. But they're under contract, so it's not, you know, this isn't a case of, as I said when we signed Aspinall, it wasn't a case of we're looking to bust him out of his contract. We're just looking to have sensible conversations. To say, if you want to do Tom Aspinall against Pereira for the World Heavyweight Championship, respect the guy, will you? If there's 100 million in the pot, don't give him $1 million. Yeah, he's a defending champion. It's a joke. So hopefully, I mean, they're going to have to do something because they're in a bad situation at the moment. And I think they're going to have to listen to the fighters and give them what's fair.
White went on Piers Morgan Uncensored and put it out there.
And Eddie Hearn's a pussy. He don't want to fucking box anybody. Come on. We can box if Eddie wants to box. I don't think Eddie wants to box.
Would you be confident?
Yeah.
Has called me a pussy.
Is there a bigger pussy than Eddie Hearn?
And called me out for a fight.
You're on for it.
Absolutely.
Of course I'd do it. Because how could you say no? Then you'd be a pussy, wouldn't you? Probably spark him out, to be fair.
Then fucking fly out here. We'll go over to the Apex and we can box.
Hearn is now posting training footage from Alexander Usyk's camp. Usyk's team member Sergey Lapin wrote on Instagram, "We are excited to welcome Eddie Hearn to our training camp. Preparation for the upcoming fight is in full swing. Dana White, Eddie is taking it very seriously." The physical mismatch is obvious on paper. Hearn stands 6'5" and is 10 years younger, while White comes in at 5'11" and 56 years old. Bookmakers already have Hearn listed as a big favorite. A Bloody Elbow poll of more than 1,100 fans also crowned Hearn the better promoter, 50% to White's 46. The combat sports world is now genuinely debating whether two promoters should punch each other in the face. And in 2026, somehow, that tracks. Alright, let's talk about actual fighting for a minute. UFC Vegas 115 went down on Saturday, April 4th at the UFC Apex in Las Vegas. Renato Moicano locked in a rear naked choke on Chris Duncan in the second round of the main event, snapping a two-fight skid that included a short-notice title shot against Islam Makhachev and a tough loss to Beneil Dariush. This was the bounce back Moicano needed, and he got it done clean. His post-fight comments went viral almost immediately. Moicano talked about growing up in Brazil and hating both Chael Sonnen and Conor McGregor, telling reporters, "When I was 15, 16, I looked up to Anderson Silva, Jose Aldo, all these guys. Chael was talking so much shit about Anderson Silva that I thought of buying a flight ticket to go to a UFC event just to sucker punch Chael Sonnen." The breakout performance of the night belonged to Abdul Rahman Yakyayev, an unranked 25-year-old from Russia who submitted Brendanson Ribeiro in the opening round. That pushed his record to 9-0 with 8 finishes. Remember that name. Fight of the night went to Tommy McMillan versus Manolo Zucchini. McMillan, a teammate of Sean O'Malley making his UFC debut, folded Zucchini with a crushing knee to the body after what Michael Bisping called all-out madness. O'Malley's coach Tim Welch was screaming "Chaos! Chaos!" from the corner during the wildest exchanges. Both fighters took home $100,000 each, the new bonus amount after the UFC doubled it at the start of 2026. If you want to understand what life actually looks like for most UFC fighters in 2026, not Jon Jones negotiating $15 million, not McGregor headlining International Fight Week, this last story tells you everything. On April 2nd, Brazilian strawweight Bruna Brasil, who had been on the UFC roster since 2022, was scrolling through her Instagram comments when a fan named Mario EG93 wrote, "UFC removed you from the roster." Brasil replied, "Really?" Nobody from the UFC had contacted her. A 32-year-old professional fighter found out she lost her job from a random comment on social media. Antonio, who went 0-4 in the UFC, and Luana Carolina were also released in the same wave of cuts. And that's what makes the fighter pay conversation hit differently. $7.7 billion from the Paramount Plus streaming deal. Bonuses doubled to $100,000 a pop. Entry-level fighters still making $12,000 to show, $12,000 to win. And one of those fighters found out she was off the roster because a fan told her before the promotion did.